So this morning we have an exciting service. We're testing out, this is the first of many that we'll most likely do, addressing cultural issues and topics that are relevant to our congregation and our faith and how we can better understand those. So this morning we're going to be talking about Gen Z and how we, the church, can better understand them, reach out to them, and make the gospel relevant. And so to do that, we have Pastor Frank Lovero from Connect Church in Heightstown, and of course, Pastor Donnie. So if you guys can come up and we'll speak to that.
All right. So you want to ask questions about Gen Z and my generation and how we can match together? I have no idea. That was a joke. You can laugh there. I have no idea. That's why Frank is here today. But we are very, very deliberate in this church about being multicultural. Look around. Have you noticed that? Yeah. It's exciting to be a part of a multicultural church. I'm the shortest. Is that why it's here? You probably got to help him lift his up too. He's Italian, so we're both probably the same height. All right. That's better. If I don't fall off, we'll be in good shape. So it's super important to us to be a multicultural, multi-racial church, right? But we can't forget something else. It's great to be multicultural, but it's also important to be multi-generational. And so that's why we're endeavoring to have these open conversations to promote a multi-generational conversation, because we may see things very different than different generations. So this is going to be a lot of fun. Pastor Frank, I'm so glad that you're here to partner with us in doing this. You have a lot of expertise, and I'm going to let you share that with the people as well. But we also are going to have some questions, but we're also having a QR code up there right there that you from the audience can ask some questions of us as well. And I'm just going to tell you right up front, I have no idea how to answer your question, but we'll do the best we can. That was also another joke. You're very stiff today. Look at your neighbor and say, I need to loosen up a little bit. I'm not going to get in trouble. There's no teacher here grading me. But I'm going to ask Pastor Frank to introduce himself and share a little bit about his experiences.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Frank, and my experience with interacting with Gen Z began when I was a student pastor a few years ago. And what happened was, when I was a teenager, the best youth groups had amazing worship and, most importantly, the best games. And so for me, I always looked forward to going to youth group because I knew it was entertaining and it was fun. And so when I became a youth pastor, I did the smart thing and I began to Google best games. And you'd be surprised. There are some really incredible and slightly dangerous games that I would have loved as a teenager. But when I did them with my youth group, they hated them. And on top of that, the same few kids kept showing up, I think because I played Minecraft with them and they liked me because of that. But there wasn't much growth happening. And so I got introduced to this idea of how you engage with Gen Z through a conference. And at that moment, me and my youth team kind of made a decision that we were going to pull back on the games. And this might even sound bad. I would spend a little less time on preparing a message every week and spend that time with kids and hanging out with them instead. And something crazy began to happen. Kids began to engage. They began to feel accepted and like this was a place where they could belong and ask questions. Kids from all different backgrounds and beliefs came in, and they knew that it was a safe space where they were able to wrestle with these questions that they had. And all of a sudden, the group began to take off and grow, and it brought to light, I think, an important part when it comes to dealing with the next generation, and it's that they're no longer looking for entertainment, but they're looking for engagement. And I think when the church tries to keep up with entertainment, we're already at a loss. You can put the best worship up here, but then tonight they can go to a concert that has more lights, smoke, machines, and sound more amazing than worship here. And your team is awesome. It's not a knock on them. They can YouTube a pastor who speaks better than me. And so if I'm here just to entertain them, I'm already at a deficit. So then the question needs to be, okay, how do I engage this next generation?
Wow. That's super, super insightful. Maybe we should just at least identify what a Gen Zer is, because some people might have absolutely no. How many know what the age group is of a Gen Zer? How many don't know? Raise your hand. I'll be honest, it's all people my age.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Come on, be nice, Frank. You want me to? So Gen Z is commonly known as Zoomers. We'll explain what that means in a minute. And they're born from 1997 to 2012. So effectively, there's some different schools on this, but effectively 12 years old to 27 years old is a Gen Zer. So along with what Pastor Frank was saying, I had a similar experience, and we talked about it in the office. And for those of you that have been around or are my age, you remember Joy Songs, and you remember some of the worship nights we've had and the conferences we had and the live albums, and the people would come out like crazy to be a part of Joy Songs. They just wanted to be maybe sing in the choir or be a part of Joy Songs. And over the last year or so, we've been doing Joy Songs worship nights, and it doesn't seem like the Gen Zers are interested at all. And it really had me scratching my head. And I'm like, I don't understand that. And this conversation today, although I just met Pastor Frank, has already been fruitful and encouraging to me to be able to touch some of the points that a Gen Zer would be concerned about and understand they're not looking for performance, they're looking for relationship. Amen.
This ties into a first question that we can ask from the audience. And so this was submitted and says, Christianity used to be a larger part of culture in America. In our current climate, Gen Z seems to not be interested in Christianity. What can the church do? And you touched on this a little bit, Pastor Frank, about engagement, not entertainment, and then you just with building relationships. Can we expand on that?
Yeah, but let me just answer that a little too. And so I'm kind of the voice of the younger people today. And I don't think that framing is fair. I think this generation and the next generation behind me actually cares about Jesus more than a lot of generations ahead of it, even mine. And I think they just do it a different way, and we are often critical of them because we don't understand it. My age group, millennials, has been very big into deconstruction over the last few years. That's a pop term that a lot of people know, where you begin to rethink some of the things that you have always believed. And in some ways it's harmful, but I think in some ways it's actually been helpful, because I do think over the last few years the church has gotten misaligned in a couple of ways. And I think we love the idea of being Christian more than actually following Jesus. And I think Gen Z wants to know how to follow Jesus, not be an American Christian. And those are two very different things.
Applaud that.
And then let me just also speak to, like, in America, we are very afraid of how culture is going, and it's shifting from traditional Christian things. And it's easier that way. But I think that we're finding that comfort doesn't bring the growth and the discipleship that we thought it did. And if you look historically at the church in Rome, the early desert fathers and mothers, all of them, right, they grew most through trial when Christianity wasn't the mainstream thing. Some people will say the worst thing that ever happened to Rome was Christianity becoming the actual religion of the country. And we're almost running a parallel thing in our modern climate where the church has just gotten comfortable, in some ways lazy. We've replaced, I think, discipleship and caring for people with just gathering once on Sunday and leaving, and that's it. And I think Gen Z sees that, and they're like, I want more than that.
Mm-hmm. That's a fantastic response. And I want to touch on that too as well, because I grew up in a generation, I'm a baby boomer, and my generation was taught a real respect for authority, following the rules, respect for people that had experience in areas that maybe I didn't have at the moment. And so we didn't really question the authority beyond maybe having a backside conversation. So platform driven. So you come into church and the preacher preaches and you take it verbatim and you walk out. But I see what you see when I'm traveling the world. There's people throughout all the world. And the church is dead, the church is dry. But I'm traveling the world and seeing that there's people that are extremely hungry for a unique, genuine encounter with the person of Jesus Christ, not a religious system, right? Yep. And if we're going to be honest, we could take a look at our generation And we get very uncomfortable when our system gets interrupted because we're used to our system. We three songs, we preach the message, we're out the door, we're Christians. But I don't think we are actually fulfilling the Great Commission to go make disciples because maybe our discipleship got a little weak along the journey on the production or the promotion of the platform. You want to jump there.
Yeah, I want to jump.
Just say one more thing, and we could talk about this because I think this is really important. So that's happening with us, and I've been saying over the last 5 years, listen, people, you keep saying that the young people don't want Jesus. They do want Jesus. They just don't want the Jesus that we're presenting to them. And you go, yeah, that's right, but we don't know how to present it to them. Is that fair?
Yeah, and I think that's where older generations, mine included, we need to look in the mirror a little bit. And I think evaluate our lives, the fruit from it in humility and allowing the Holy Spirit to just guide us and nudge us. And are we actually living what Jesus called us to live?
There is a very large study in partnership with the Barna Group that a Christian organization did, and there's a quote from it that says, the majority of dissatisfied youth did not go through a crisis of faith or intellectually reject church teachings. They left because they weren't interested in the Christian life that they saw. Goes on to talk about how it was not modeled properly to them. It's an overwhelming majority of younger people are interested in the life of Jesus, think that he is wise and trustworthy and loving, but are not interested in the framework of the church as an organization.
Well, the painful reality is, and I'll say it for my generation, they don't trust us. Because we presented something, we said this is what it would do. We try to get them in our building for a Sunday, right? But look around, and I'm going to talk about the 800-pound gorilla in the room. We keep seeing religious leaders that are supposed to have it all together just falling morally, like moral failure left and right, and more now than ever. And maybe it's because they have to try to keep this image that's not even real. And the Gen Zers are like, if that's Christ, I really don't want a part of him. And therefore, they don't trust us. You say, well, how do you know that, Pastor? And we were talking about it in the room and back in the office before. There's pastors right now that I check in on. They're younger than me. They're in their 30s or young 40s. And I'll check in on how you doing. What can I do for you? How can I help you? Do you need to vent in any way? And I'm not patting myself on the back. I'm just realizing that what looks like a rejection to the older experience is really not. It's just we're not communicating properly. And so I'll say, how can I help you? And they'll say things to me like, no one has ever, no mentor, pastor, people I worked for when I was done never checked on me. They just kind of threw me away. And as I was saying that in the office, Pastor Frank said, honestly, I could use help. No one ever checks on me. And Linda and I look at him and say, we'll adopt you. We'll take you on in any way. Because we think this dialogue is so important because we need in America, not just in other parts of the world, a multi-generational church. David Ireland said it best. If you have a church of all old people, the church dries up. If you have a church of all young people, it blows up. But if you have old and young together, it grows up. And that's what we're after.
Nice. Just for context here, there's a question that was asked, what is the age group for millennials? So the answer to that is millennials are generally considered to be born between 1981 and 1996, which would make them between 28 and 43 years old. And so above that is Gen X, and above that is the boomer generation. So a question that was asked also, Gen Z is the most interested in social issues. Did the church miss an opportunity to address social issues along with Gen Z? If yes, what can we do now?
Frank, help me.
Yeah, I'm only here today, so
go for it.
If you don't like me, Pastor Donnie's your pastor. I'll be gone. We did miss it, and some churches I think engaged a little bit, but somewhere along the way, and I think this is one of the frustrations of just a younger church member, the older generation just wants to be right so badly that when we sit down and have conversations, they don't, and we say communication, right? They don't even want to hear where we're coming from. They just want to be right. Yeah. And so if that's the posture, And even like me as a younger pastor, I'm kind of a unicorn. There aren't many like me, and most of them are around your age. And so then if I'm sitting in conversations like this about social issues with pastors in the boomer generation and I don't feel heard, then I just go, all right, like what's the point? Like I'm not going to fight over this. There's no reason for it. And so I think, and the issue with all of this is, right, caring for the widow, the orphan, the overlooked, all of these things, like I feel like I've heard someone teach about the importance of those things.
Yeah.
And I believe it's Jesus who we follow and we sing about to be our Lord. And then if we're not willing to have conversations around those and we just hold to what we've held to forever, and again, I think that's one of the biggest gaps of like, there's a clear divide, and Tim Keller says it this way, of within these realms, you often care about two of the four things. On one side, it's the traditional family, and it's rights for the unborn and children. And then the other side is social justice and immigration. And if you look at our political system, it typically divides right down the middle. And his argument is that to have a worldview around the gospel, you need all four of those. But in our American culture that we live out, we often pick one or two. And so then to even have discussions around the four of those isn't possible, because if I pick that I care about social issues, it means I don't care about the other side. And so I think that that's a false dichotomy that we have to get rid of and realize that all of these things matter to Jesus. And our political system isn't the gospel. It's not anywhere in Scripture. So then let's have conversations around these.
I mean, it seems, yeah. It seems to me in studying the Gospels that Jesus visited all the social issues. It seemed like he dealt with people that were sick and poor and people that were rejected. He was rejected himself, so I think he could identify with social issues. And the book of James tells us this is pure religion and undefiled. It's pure religion, you know. But wait, I hold on to my stance because I'm a Christian. Well, that's why I haven't really preached political party here. I preach the Bible and preach the gospel. Because if we start just preaching one side of the aisle, we've just excluded a bunch of people that don't see it exactly the way we see it. Hello? I got one amen. But the reality is, what am I called to preach? Jesus Christ and him crucified. The death, the burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. I'll stand up for what's right, of course, according to the scripture, but we're supposed to preach the gospel of the Lord Jesus Christ. I would like to talk about communication at some point too. But.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit and pivot here to it. So obviously one of the larger culture forces for Gen Z, I think, ends up being the use of technology and them being raised in an age where that's just a default for them, wasn't necessarily for the other generations. And so one of the questions that we have is, how do you balance the pressures of social media with maintaining genuine personal connections? Can you guys speak to that?
Can you say that one more time?
How do you balance the pressures of social media with maintaining genuine personal connections?
I think it's extremely hard. And some of the research that I did, and again, Pastor Frank is much more up to date on his research and has done a lot more forums on the topic. But as I'm doing research, I'm reading the rate which technology changed and improved is exponentially faster than it was 50 years ago. So I have another statement here I have to read to you, that the average Zer is dealing with more information, more challenge, more technology change, that we could even, and complex issues that you and I can even, my generation, can even possibly imagine. And I think this is some of the reason. You said it in the first service. You're hearing a lot about emotional difficulties, a lot of depression. And I think a lot of the depression and isolation has to do with the fact that there's so much information and so much pressure on them in so many different directions that depression has become a deeper part of their lives today. So I want to just touch one other thing, if I can, if you can hold that, Frank. I think the issue here, one of the big issues, is communication. So how do we communicate when we have grown up in two completely different worlds? You know, technology natives. They grew up with technology. We're trying to figure it out. It's hysterical. From years ago, I can remember my friend saying, yeah, I try to work the controller, and I got to show my kids I know more than they do, and they take the controller from me, and they just say, you're driving me crazy. Let me just fix this for you and show you how it works. And we're like, no, I know how to do it. Don't take it. Because we want to be right, because we're older. But I think someone's laughing because you probably have done that before, right? But I think communication, look at this verse in Proverbs 15:22. Without communication, purposes are disappointed. But I think we have to be able to identify, what is communication? Is communication me telling my daughter, I'm right about everything and you got to do it this way because I know how to do it? That's not communication, that's a lecture. And I think they resent us because we lecture them. Communication is, I want to share what I'm feeling, and from the center and the foundation of why I feel the way I do. And I'm not great at this, I'm working at this, and my kids, or the one that lives at home still, Natalie, be able to share with me how she's feeling without feeling like she's going to get shut down and shut out, and it doesn't matter how she feels, I know better. We have to find out, where is she coming from? Because she's dealing with issues like other Zers that I have never dealt with in the level of technology, advancement, change, and pressures that's on their lives. So communication is listening as well as speaking, but not just hearing words, but listening with empathy and trying to find out where they're coming from so we can make a connection. Because if we don't communicate, there will be no connection at all.
You want to expand on that and go back to the social media portion of it?
Yeah, so just one thought. This idea of hearing and understanding has been part of human society forever. We're just bad at it as Americans. And someone framed it this way, and it was a really helpful way for me to understand communication, even in my marriage. And it's this principle called the Indian talking stick. And so Native Americans, whenever they were communicating, whoever was speaking would hold the stick until they were done talking, but they wouldn't pass the stick up until they felt like everybody in the circle understood what they were saying. And when they felt heard and understood, then they would pass it to the next person to be able to share and to speak. And it's totally different, right? If we use it in our modern context, if we're holding the stick, it's just enough time to blurt out what we want and the next person's ripping it out of our hand. Again, what if we're listening to understand and the other person more than to be understood ourselves? And it takes humility to care about the other person and what they have to think more than being right. And then back to the social media part of it. How do you balance the pressures of it, maintaining genuine personal connection? I actually think Gen Z is good at this. I said in the first service, we had a young adult hike a couple weeks ago, and a couple of them didn't know about it, and I was like, hey, I put it on Instagram, like, why didn't you know? And they're like, we deleted Instagram. Like, we realized that all of the things that have been told about this being true and helpful actually aren't, and so, like, we would rather just hang out in person. So, like, I think they get it. And the ironic thing is we're so quick to bash on Gen Z and Alpha for how they use social media, but it's like millennials and older who are actually bad at it. We're the ones who are on our phones all the time instead of engaging with our kids. We're the ones who are fighting with people on it about politics while they're out hanging out with each other. And again, not that there isn't pressure still, right? Still the best gift you can give a 7-year-old is a YouTube channel so that they can express themselves. But even that, right, if they need to find other outlets to express themselves, what does it tell us about older generations where they don't feel like they can do that around us?
That's incredible. Is there any study out there, because you just sparked a thought in my mind, is there any study out there comparing the older generation to Z's and Alpha? And your point is, if you check our social media daily tracking, we're probably on 8 hours a day, right? So is there any way to track, maybe you don't know the answer to this, but it would be interesting, to track how much, and I think there is, Sajith will help us with that, I'm sure there is. Is there a way to track how much my generation spends time on social media for entertainment? And I think there is, because I've seen those grids, as opposed to information, research, and activity. I would venture to guess most of the people my age are on it more for entertainment than anything else.
Yeah, and Gen Z is on there starting businesses, mining Bitcoin, things like that, where they're making money and they're using it for the benefit where we're just wasting time. And so a lot of times, because we use it badly, we look at them and we think that they're using it badly, but they're taking online courses, they're doing schoolwork, because their whole world revolves around a screen at this point. And so we assume because they're on it, they're wasting time, where they're, again, they're going to, right? They're kids, but for the most part, they're being useful.
Yeah, I mean, what we do know is that the studies have shown social media is basically not good for anybody, and it's detrimental to the way that we communicate. And so I think we can make the conclusion that hopefully the trend continues towards less usage, and people realize that we need to connect in person and not just through our phones. Moving on to the next question is that the older generations have lots of valuable teachings to pass down, and the older generation often feels like Gen Z is not applying a lot of this information. What can we do to get them to listen better?
Wow, so let me first talk on that, because I think I'd speak for everyone that is a parent, to the most part. I do feel, I talk for pastor, and I've gotten questions. I've had parents, my siblings, say, you know, what is it with these young generations? Don't they understand that we have been through a lot of pain, paid a big price to have the experience that we have, and it would make our life, it would make our world to have young people say, can you impart to me? Would you? And it seems like to us that there's no interest in that whatsoever. And it could be a couple of reasons. They don't trust us, or we haven't behaved properly, or we've lectured in the past. All those things are valid. But from our perspective, we do have a wealth of information that's mixed with experience that it would give us joy, pleasure, happiness to pass on, so that the younger generation wouldn't make some of the same blunders and painful mistakes that we've made. Now, maybe we've never communicated exactly like that, but that's what we go through, and we feel isolated, we feel rejected, we feel not wanted, especially as we get a little older, you know? Amen? But that's not the truth about how they feel, as far as what we understand.
So let me just ask a question real fast to the older generations in the room. So Gen Z is teenagers to young adults right now. When you were that age, how many of you lined up to hear advice from the people older than you? You know what I'm saying? And I think sometimes when we get to a certain point, we look and we're like, it's them, but let's be honest. When I was their age, I didn't want people telling me what to do. And I resented the people who did that. It's only now where I'm later on in life and I realize the importance of wisdom ahead of me. And I think sometimes we just forget what life was like when we were that age because we just get older and we don't remember it as much. But like, they're no different than any other generation that way. You know, my grandfather used to tell me things about life, and now I wish I listened to them more. He knew what he was talking about, but at the time I'm like, he's old. He doesn't know what he's talking about. And let me just say why are they not saving money but going out and eating part. So that was learned from generations ahead of us.
I left that out, but yeah, go ahead.
I'm like, that was learned. And a lot of that is, so a fascinating thing is culture emerged, right? When boomers were born, there was also a change in culture where for the first time advertising was marketed towards you guys. And they realized that you were the first generation that people could make money off of. And so you then got promoted through the TV, became accessible, and you saw commercials and ads targeted towards you. And so you went out to eat and things like that. And actually you guys lost what you learned from the silent generation who grew up in the Depression of save money, reuse paper towels, all of those things. And so again, even just generationally, like we're not the first ones to shift from that. We're not the first ones to do things a little bit differently.
Excellent observation. Excellent. Really, really good. So my mom is watching, and she could probably tell you that when I was probably 17, 18 years old, I had such a struggle and resentment, and if you're honest, you'll say this, you'll think about this, because I wanted to be independent, but I couldn't afford to be. I didn't want to be told what I was doing wrong, but I had to. And I had to, like, I could make all these things up, but the point is that I had to live at home. You know, I had to eat their food.
And if you're under my roof, you're going to listen to what I say.
Exactly. And I had a resentment, and so to your point, that's generational. I will say that my kids are the dichotomy to this because they all are very frugal, and they're savers.
Well, Gen Z is actually really frugal. So that is my generation is not because we want what our parents had in our 30s, not realizing that you got it later on in life. And so, like, we graduate college, and we're like, I want a house, a nice car, family, I want everything. Right. And you guys are like, wait, hold on. Like, it took us a couple decades to get here. Gen Z grew up in a bunch of financial crisis. They grew up during COVID and the financial crisis that happened with that. And so they're actually really frugal. And I think even for me, I learned some habits from them that I'm like, oh, this is helpful.
Good stuff. So I think part of that, too, is that why don't they want our experience? And I think we touched on this earlier. Technology has given them access to cited information that's been reviewed by peers from the internet. Like, so I might be able, I wasn't in World War II, but I'm saying someone that was in World War II can share their experiences, like Grandpa. They said, before we said they exchanged Grandpa for Google, right? But Google can tell them more about World War II, right? About Hitler and all that happened there, about Winston Churchill, who's my favorite guy. I love studying about Winston. But information that Grandpa doesn't have at his fingertips or recall. So there's a disconnect. Grandpa doesn't know enough. But I will say this. Information is one piece of it. Knowledge is another piece of it. But applied knowledge gives experiences. So the experience is the piece, if we can marry together with the knowledge, the intellect, would be a really powerful combination for young people.
Yeah, I would just say young people, access to all the wisdom in the world doesn't give you what you think it does. I think of Solomon, and he was given one wish from God, and it was to have all the wisdom. And if you read the rest of his life, it was a train wreck. And so for younger generations, right, we have access to more information than ever before. But if we don't have people around us who give us the wisdom on how to interpret that and best apply it, our lives will probably look similar to Solomon's in this fact that, like, we're just bouncing all over the place, trying to do our best, but making a mess, because we need shared experience and people who have been through similar things to say, hey, this might tell you this is true. It's not. Like, I've been there. I believe that. I blew up everything. So, like, pay attention. So.
Well, and this is an awesome opportunity, too. I think, like, the pieces that we've learned here, right, are that younger generations want connection. The older generations want to be heard and pass on wisdom. So connect with a younger person. Care about them first, and then you will be able to pass on the information that you have and have learned from your life. But I think the key part there is care about the younger person first and not just being like trying to communicate the wisdom that you have, because both are needed. So if we do that, I think there will be a better symbiotic relationship for both groups.
Agreed.
A reminder to submit your questions if you would like to have them.
So let me share while you're submitting more questions. It's one of the reasons I said earlier, you know, I preach from the platform. I tell people that say, you know, the next generation doesn't want the Lord. They're just, you know, void of that desire. It's not true. But I've always said, you know, it's the Jesus that we're presenting to them. And the Jesus that we've been presenting to them is based on our foundation and where we've come from, right? So recently here in Abundant Life, and you'll be hearing this come out more, we're switching our discipleship because we want to make disciples after Jesus Christ, the person. And young people and us as well, if we're honest, we could have gotten off track and just come to church and lost our discipleship. But we want to disciple people after Jesus Christ. Come follow me, and I'll make you fishers of men, Jesus said. You know? So we've left the old program discipleship, and we're going to something called a path discipleship. Well, from a new person to someone that's been saved for 30 years. Locate where you are in your path to following Jesus Christ, and we're going to help you on that journey. Not from a program, but on a path. In relationship and interaction for you personally to get to the next place in your discipleship walk with the Lord. And to me, Gen Zers are looking for authentic conversation and authentic role models and authentic relationship. And I think this will be helpful as we as a church culture change from a program culture to a performance and a program culture to a culture that puts people on a path in their walk with the person of Jesus Christ.
Yeah, I can attest to that. In our Bible studies, we're clearly seeing that change happen, and we're trying to model that as well as we start up more and more of our Bible studies. So that's great, and we have a perfect opportunity to impart some wisdom to a younger person who asks a very important question. For somebody that is in school, when someone is being mean or bragging to you, what should you do to stop it? How do you take action in a biblical way?
So this is a question from a Zer.
From a young person, yeah.
Okay.
I don't know how old.
Wisdom of an old man, just punch him right in the face. That's what
Perfect.
we did.
Yep. Quickly, somebody say something else.
I mean, that's how we would handle it too, you know?
Oh, you're going to be the pastor next. I'm out of here.
Yeah. So I would just say to that person stand up for yourself, right? Like, I know that in our age, like, we want to be kind and be nice and things like that, and that's true. But let me just say, and I think it's the hard part for Gen Z, of so much of who you are is fluid, and you allow other people to define who you are so much. The things you post on social media, if they get a lot of likes, you keep it up. If it doesn't, you delete it. And then the things that get more likes, you begin to put those up more to become that. And I think that has kind of transitioned into real life too, where if somebody speaks up and they don't say something that they don't like you or something like that, like, who cares? Like, talk to counselors, get help if it wounds you deeply. Like, those things are important. Talk to your parents about it. They've been through the same thing. Like, people picking on people has just been part of humanity for all of time because people are insecure and they take out their insecurities on other people to feel better about themselves. But then I would also say to that, like, and this is one that I wrestle with. So Jesus speaks to this too. And he says, if someone hits your one side, offer the other side. And I don't like that because that part's hard. And clearly there should be boundaries and things that you put in place to protect yourself. Like, you shouldn't just be walked on. But I do think in our age, there is a moment for the church to, like, model how to deal with conflict in a way that is healthy and points to Jesus. And I think one of the issues with the church overall is that we're just not good at that. And so, again, young people, like, when people come against you, like, again, it's happened. Talk to somebody older than you. They've been there. You're not alone in it. But then, like, don't let it shape who you are. One person speaking doesn't undo, like, this room of people. They love you. They support you. They're here for you. Ultimately, right, our image, our identity was spoken to us in Genesis 1. We're created in the image of God. And that's where your purpose comes from. And there are going to be people who try and detract that and take it away from you. And in your formative years, it's so much easier to, like, say that, but then to actually live it out is difficult, and I understand that. But don't forget where your purpose, where your identity, where your value comes from. One conversation with somebody who might say something to you doesn't change all that.
I love that. That's really good. And to add to that, that's why becoming a disciple of Jesus as a young person is super important. Because when you begin to see through the Bible and the scriptures how God defines you, You don't allow anybody to define you. And you find your self-worth in the person of Jesus Christ. And I am identified with Christ. Nevertheless, I live. Not I, but Christ in me. You identify with the God of the universe. So if one voice is telling you that you're less than, he's telling you you're way more than a conqueror through Christ who strengthens you. So that's why it's important to feed on the scriptures and know what Jeremiah 29:11 says. God says, look, I have a plan for you, right? A plan for your good and not for evil, for a hope for your future, an expected great ending for you. So it's important what voice we listen to, and knowing the voice of the scriptures gives you such confidence. Paul wrote, cast not away your confidence, because it gives a great reward of confidence and power to your life, right? So when you know who you are, absolutely not one voice is going to diminish that or take away from that. But I do agree with you, Pastor Frank. Bring others in the community into that conversation with you. You're not alone. And don't be bullied and afraid to open your mouth like then it's going to get worse. No, bring in the community. Bring in the Christian community. Bring in your family. And then if they feel it's next to elevate that to the administration of the school.
Yeah, that's great. These answers are awesome. Try to pick it up just a little bit to answer a few more. But this one's really great, and super appreciative of this person asking this question. It's a younger person who asks, how do you show the older generation that you are walking with Jesus? If they do not see it, is it because you are not modeling walking with Jesus correctly?
Yeah, let me just say, Jesus actually explains this, and he says it's fruit. Are you loving? Are you kind? Are you patient? Are you faithful? Do you have self-control? And then Jesus actually simplified it even more than that. He said the way people will know that you are a follower of Jesus is your love for one another.
Each other.
And this is to everybody?
Yeah.
Right? What would the church look like if maybe we got back to that a little bit?
Yeah.
Maybe it would be easier to identify what genuinely following Jesus looks like if we were for each other and not against each other. And we spoke encouragement instead of criticism. And so, young person, we may have dropped the ball in modeling what that looks like. Love people well.
Amazing. So, Mike, for my generation, I apologize for my generation to the younger folks, because we have set the bar for our, what's the word I'm looking for? Our metrics for how spiritual you are is different than the Bible sometimes. Why? Because if you're not dancing and shouting during worship, we think, I guess they're really not committed to Christ. Can I just go there? They don't worship like we used to worship here. When we used to worship, man, the place would tear up. And that could happen, whatever. But we measure your spirituality by how we responded to God in our generation. And if you don't respond the same way, you're not spiritual. Whether we want to say that or not, that's the filter that we're looking at. And I think we need to address that.
Yeah, that's great. So the next question is, Christianity often gets a bad rap in the media as a religion. How do we show people not just the religion in Christianity, but the truly important part of it, which is our relationship with God?
So I'm going to jump on that. I like that question. How do we show, well, it's the older generation. Oh, okay. Oh, there it is. Yeah, Christianity often gets a bad rap in the media as a religion. I think because what we've presented has not been as authentic as it could possibly be. I think we got away from true, authentic discipleship into crowds, mega churches, and performance from a platform. I'm a worship leader for years. Multi-million-dollar contracts with record labels and multi-million dollars to produce incredible video and incredible songs. So it's become an industry. And now we've got the industry in the church, leading the church for a performance for another rah-rah session of Christians to come together for a hype meeting. I'm sorry, but that's just true. And I think if you want the media to stop saying, another guy falling into sin, look at these clowns. Another guy driving an $80 million jet, look at these clowns. Another guy pointing a finger at reporters, looking like a demon and yelling at them, they were pastors. Hello? If we want them to stop looking at us like we're clowns, can we stop acting like clowns and act more like disciples? That's how I feel. And I guess I'm old enough that I could say that now, but I'm not going to be a part of a clown show. You laugh, but it's true. How do we make people in the world, in the media, look at us and say, I want to be a part of that? Be a disciple, walk with Christ, locate where I am today and walk a little closer. Read my Bible, pray. Ask the Lord to give me the characteristics of Christ. Let me, the fruits of the Spirit be a part of my life. Just because I speak in tongues and fall on the floor doesn't mean I'm a good Christian. I know a lot of people that spoke in tongues and fell at the floor, and they stole from the government, they cheated on their wives, and did all kinds of crazy stuff. So let's be genuine and authentic believers and stop the nonsense.
Awesome. Next question is there a spiritual explanation as to why Gen Z seemingly struggles more with anxiety and depression? How can older generations help?
Is there a spiritual explanation? Yes, but I think it's very practical too. Just a real quick breakdown. So in the agricultural age, who you were mattered. The family was together. They worked on the farm. Children were viewed as an asset. When we moved to the industrial age, what you did became what defined you, and then children began to become a liability because now they didn't help on the farm. They were a mouth you had to feed. And so instead of having a lot of kids, we had less because you had to provide for them. And then from there, we moved to the information age, which began what I thought defines who I am. And so I begin to align with people who think like me. And now we've shifted to the platform age, which again, I'm building platforms around what people think. The more likes somebody has, the more I trust them than traditional institutions. Churches, the government, we don't trust them anymore because their platform has broken down. Social media influencers, news people have a bigger platform. We trust them. Now, on top of that, you add in the smartphone. And parents, let me just speak to you real quickly. I have 2 little kids. I'm very early on in the parenting process. So in 10 years, I'll give you a better taste of whether what I think is true or not. But for right now, we've replaced parenting and we've put it on other people's hands. We bring them to church for an hour and we say, church, disciple my kid. And if our kids are on screens, I'm going to say 10 hours a week just to make the math easy. That's 70 hours a week that they're taking in other content. You're putting them in church for an hour. What's going to win out? And on top of that, and I get it, I'm bivocational, which means I have a full-time job and I pastor a church. I come home, I'm tired. And my 2-year-old daughter wants to play in the sand pit and throw sand in my eyes and push my face into it to see my face print in the sand. And it is so much easier to plop on the TV and to sit there and veg out and just let her watch. And from a very early age, kids are looking for emotional connection with their parents. And neurologically, it is wiring them to let them know that they are in a safe environment. And if kids are not getting that at a young age and they begin then to grow up and look to it to all different things, and now you add in social media and all of the ways that they're looking for it there, on top of just the pressure and the information that they're accessing at a faster rate than ever before, that's why we're anxious and we're depressed. And then on top of it, you add in this tension between generations, and kids don't feel like they can speak to their parents, so who do they go to? And they begin to feel more lonely and isolated, and loneliness and all of those things, again, lead to depression and anxiety. So there are so many things stacked against our kids right now. And so like parents, I get it. It is so hard to be present all the time. especially when both parents are working and you're trying to find time for each other and your kids, and bills and things are expensive right now. The most important thing. And I read a book recently, and it reshaped how I think about parenting, called Take Back Your Family by Jefferson Bethke. And it speaks in sports language, which I love. So your family is your team. And the same way in the agricultural age, all of you were part of a team. God has given you your kid uniquely wired and talented and gifted. Make them part of the team. Teach them to be part of your family. Invite them in. Let them be part of discussions. If you go on a work trip and you're able to take your kid, take them with you. Let them see what you do and learn. The way that kids were taught how to do life in the agricultural age, we need to do that now. Take your kid with you. Let them see what you do. I've started sending videos of my daughter at work every day and like, Daddy's doing this today, check it out. And she loves it. She feels like she's part of my life and we're connecting in more ways. And so again, there are ways to combat this, but there's so much against them. Older generations, how do you help? Love kids well. Whether you are a parent or not, parenthood is a scriptural idea. Everyone in this room is called to be a spiritual parent, whether you have kids or not. So how do you help? On Sunday morning, when you see a little kid, get down to their level, speak to them eye to eye, let them know they're loved. Serve in kids ministry. I get it, it's exhausting. I was a kids pastor for 4 years. I didn't really love it. I had to do it because I wanted to be a youth pastor, but I learned so much in that phase and learned how to relate to kids and just see how much they just want to be loved. Love kids well.
You said a lot. Great.
Yeah, so you just shared a lot of advice already, but our last question was going to be, as Pastor Donnie, if you can share one thing that the older generations can do better. The question is one thing or habit that we can change to communicate better with the other generation. If you can share something for the older and then you for the younger.
Real quick, I mean, my perfect example, and not to pick on my family, my perfect example is when my kids were, I think Michael and Deanna were in college at the time, and we were at my mom's house. And everybody was there. The entire family was there. I forget what the occasion was. And my nephew started, because he was very aggressive, very intelligent, and was sharing loudly his opinions, social opinions, political opinions. And all of the uncles jumped all over him and belittled him for his belief system at that particular time. Now, since then, he's changed some of the beliefs. And, they were throwing things out like, you don't even have a mortgage. Wait till you get a job. You don't even know what you're talking about. Like, you're talking about these social issues that are so important, these political issues that are so important, but you don't even know what you're talking about. So it became combative. And I think that's our go-to. We wanted people in our generation, when we were growing up, to give us room, space to grow, to make mistakes, to blow ourselves up. We wanted that right. But for some reason, we don't give that right. I'm apologizing, because I'm sure I've done it in some shape or form. We don't give them space to express themselves. Again, communication is listening with empathy. Shut your mouth. They say it in Italian, state zitta. Bite your tongue. Give space and don't force the conversation. Let conversation organically happen. And when they want to talk, boy, listen your head off. And then see how much they're willing to hear of your side of things. Listening with empathy is something that my generation needs to learn. Let's stop lecturing and start listening.
So I would just say, I think one habit that we can build that is really important, and we use this as a rallying cry at our church, and it's just called around the table. And your table will tell you a lot about who you are. As you gather throughout the week, if your table is just people who look like you, ethnically, generationally, then you're probably not growing and you're not hearing and you're not understanding. What would it look like if throughout the week you were intentional with your table to put different people around it? What would you learn? How would you grow? In my life, I've seen that to be true exponentially. When my table looks different than how it did most of my life, I've grown more than I ever have. And I think when that happens, and we see it in Acts 2, right? They gathered around meals, prayer, and the Lord's word. What would it look like if we were about that throughout the week? And let me just say, you spoke to discipleship earlier, which I think is a key point, right? Our church has what you're creating, so I encourage you, and even your church, like, be part of this. When we launched our church in 2020, this was a part of who we were as we launched. And it is one of the most incredible things to see 70-year-old people sitting down with 23-year-old people, studying the Word of God, having meals together, and praying over each other. And if the church can get that right, the world will take notice. The divisions, they exist everywhere. What would it look like if the church was distinctly different in it? And our tables were full with people. And look, just because you have a meal, it doesn't mean you have to agree on everything, but it does mean that we're in this together. And we love each other, and we're for each other because we are fellow image bearers, and we carry and we are working together to love Christ together.
Thank you so much for joining us today, and I know that that word encouraged your heart and lifted your spirit. Hey, if you want more content like this, good sermons, good topics, just go ahead and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Right on the bottom there, you can learn how to subscribe. And again, if you have any prayer needs or any requests, you can go ahead and make those requests right in the comment section, and we would love to pray for you. So God bless you. We'll see you real soon.